Hello, and welcome to another episode of Solipsist Watched. I'm your host, the Social Solipsist, and this week I watched The Hitman's Bodyguard from 2017. Now, this is a movie that was vaguely on my radar. At one point or another, somebody recommended it to me, saying it was enough out of the normal, range of this kind of thing that it was worth checking out for some of the novelty, even if it wasn't like an extraordinary film. And I think it's worth, as always, remembering the context in which any film releases. And the the 2017 was not a great year for a lot of cinema, especially dramas and comedies. Obviously, I don't want to speak in too broad of platitudes, but um, it wasn't an era where it was sort of a transitional period for a lot of for audience attention, I guess I would say, for the kinds of things that audiences wanted to see, and really the trailing off of the late 20 or the early 2010s era of like sort of harder comedies, trying to sort of maintain their footing as they were sort of burning their goodwill. And this is just different enough that I think it probably could have squeaked by on that in some respects. It's not particularly extraordinary in any respect, but it is in some ways a pleasant surprise. Uh, I think the most notable thing about it, for both on its face and while watching it, is the cast list. With Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson as the two stars, the on screen chemistry that they have together, while not like extraordinary, is enough, and their banter is solid enough and their relationship is believable enough, that it is solid and compelling. And where a lot of I'm going to classify this as basically it's a buddy cop movie by another name, because neither of them are cops. But this is essentially the same structure as a buddy cop movie. It is two people stuck together who don't exactly get along. They have reason to dislike each other. They are very different in personality. Throughout their trials and tribulations, they learn to appreciate each other's differences, and grow to like each other, so on and so forth. It's essentially buddy cop, but modernized in a way that I haven't really necessarily seen before. And what kind of I don't want to jump into the things that don't work too quickly, but I am going to say that it has some tone problems. Now, as I understand it, that may partially be because this was originally not written as a comedy and was somewhat haphazardly adapted into one as it was being produced, or just as production was starting on it. And that does make sense for Ryan Reynolds and Samuel L. Jackson, both of whom are capable of much more serious roles. Sam Jackson more than Ryan Reynolds, I would say. But Ryan Reynolds in particular has been somewhat typecast as a very quippy, sort of like handsome but quippy, kind of annoying, kind of like anti-hero kind of person, in whatever role he seems to be in. And it works pretty well for him, but it has varying levels of effectiveness in the context in which it works. Weirdly, in this one, I think it works better because they give it enough of a twist that it doesn't just seem like Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds again. It also is adapted enough because of adapted enough from a typical buddy comedy structure, because both characters are in a morally gray situation. They are not on, rather than being like two cops with different attitudes, they are basically on opposite sides, forced to work together, and then sort of this is where the problems is the problems are. The structure of the movie overall is a big problem because the core plot is I don't want to be too damning, but the core plot is basically pointless. It is a framing tool to get these two into a car, a room, a location, a fight together. The rest of it is mostly unnecessary, or could be easily replaced with any number of other similar plots that it makes no difference. And the rest of the plot that surrounds them is not compelling enough in its own right to allow for how often it interrupts the buddy copping to actually insert itself and try and be serious for a minute. The actual alleged stakes of the film are relatively high, with the reason for their being together in the first place being pretty grim. But it ultimately only serves to basically set up a number of set pieces for them to get themselves through, a number of hurdles, locations they have to be in, situations in which they are under duress and have to use their skills, or either compete with each other or cooperate with each other in order to make things happen. And given how serious the tone of the rest of the story going on around it is, it comes to a pretty bad tonal mismatch, especially right near the end when the plot is coming to a conclusion and this sort of buddy cop relationship is resolving itself. But it's a comedy scene resolving in a drama plot line is basically the gist of the whole film, but especially the end. And it's just in an especially stark contrast right near the end, where you're not sure how you're supposed to be feeling in the scene. Are you supposed to be laughing? Are you supposed to be remorseful or appreciative of the relationship that they have formed over the amount of time they've been together? Or are you supposed to care about these other characters and what's happening to them? Or are you supposed to care about the very real stakes of the larger world that surrounds the two characters, that is like borderline sort of like Jason Bourne kind of tone, in terms of its like very serious note that it how seriously it takes itself. And it doesn't fall apart and it doesn't really break down, but it doesn't mesh together very well. There are some really, really good action scenes in this film. I think that is, aside from the chemistry of the characters, the thing that stands out the most is there's some questionable ones, but there are also some really good ones with some quality choreography and at times some pretty good camera work. At times not so great too, but some good stuff there. There's also a number of chase scenes that honestly look better than a lot of much higher budget things that have come out in the last 10 years. Not universally, but like some fun locations, some fun use of stuff while still maintaining a believability. But as far as the believability goes too, like the action scenes sort of are again mismatched with the the tone of the comedic aspects, where the comedic aspects lean into at times lead into an absurdity that the rest of the film doesn't necessarily warrant. And I almost wish it had pushed further into that area. I would worry about it going into Kingsman territory, where I really do not care for the Kingsman movies very much. I think they are over the top in a way that it is simultaneously too slapstick and ridiculous and cheesy, and also too self-serious at the same time, and it's sort of very unpleasant. And I would worry about this movie going that direction if it had pushed any harder. However, I think if they had rewritten the core plot arc to give a less tense reason for the initial setup of the buddy copping, and if the stakes had been different, if the obstacles that they were up against were not so darn serious themselves, even if it's just a one scene set piece, sometimes it takes itself so seriously that you're just like, why are these comedy guys fighting these like war criminals who are genuinely trying to kill them? It just doesn't mix in tone all that well. I want it to be tightened up. I want it to either like tone down the comedy a little bit and make them take it a little bit more seriously, or I want it to go a little bit more full bore in terms of the cheese and the over the top aspects of it, because I think it's almost there. There are some great comedy scenes, and I feel so far I've done a disservice to the rest of the cast, actually. There are some great comedy scenes with a variety of other actors, some who are relatively minor but recognizable, some who are much more major. I do want to point out in particular, Gary Oldman is Gary Oldman. He's one of the greatest actors of our generation, and regardless of the quality of the film that he is in, he absolutely nails it. Weirdly, he might be this sleeper, the the best actor. Well, he is the best actor in the film. There's no two ways about that. But he also might be the only one who actually balances the like full drama and full comedy in a way that actually works, because he is playing such an overtly hateable character, and for very real, very serious reasons, and yet manages to balance a character who is all of those things, a real world horrible person, or an analog for a real world person, or a real world type of person as well, and being very believable in that, while still writing that tonal line where he's like still a little bit over the top, a little bit cheesy, a little bit like James Bond or cartoon villainy, just enough to like not have a face off with him seem like a complete tonal break. He is excellent. Salma Hayek is also quite good. I don't think she's a particularly incredible actor, but she, when given the right roles, does an excellent job. I think there are a few moments in this film where she gets the tone a little too cheesy, when the tone is a little bit more serious, but she also has some scenes where she absolutely chews the shit out of the scenery, and both in serious and comedic ways that are some of the most memorable scenes in the film. And in some of those, she's basically alone. So in that respect, I think she's quite good. I actually also want to give a shout out to Elodie Young, who I think the only other thing I've seen her in is what's the name of the shit, I'm gonna forget the name of the TV series that she's in. Hold on. The cleaning lady. That's what she's been known for recently. She's had a few minor roles before. She's always quite good, but sort of in very limited capacity. And I think she does an excellent job here. I don't actually like the cleaning lady that much, but she's very good in it. And she serves her role here very well. She is very much on the like much more dramatic and serious side, but manages to sort of reach into that goofy comedic element of it or play off of it enough as a very serious character that I don't think it breaks down too much. There's a bunch of other people in here as well, and I think they're all pretty darn good. Some notable like long-term character actors who are by face but not by name, and they're all pretty good. Ultimately, like it's hard to give this a much of a recommendation at all, if I'm totally honest. Like while you're watching it, I think it is definitely entertaining, and entertaining in a way that still beats out like 70 to 80% of action comedy dramedy things, comedy drama things and movies in the last 10 years. But I still think it's like just barely passing muster for me in terms of being a quality film. For every one thing that it does really well, whether it's some of the writing, some of the banter, some of the acting, some of the cinematography and the action scenes and stuff like that, there's something else that doesn't work so well. There's shot composition that doesn't work. There's somebody on a handy cam that should have been a steady cam. There's like a weird composite or a weird green screen that's just like, that's ridiculous, or a particular line that's like, that's just not what you described at all. The visual doesn't match what you just said, or that ADR was bad, or the music is overwhelming. Some of the music in particular really is like a 50-50 split on whether I was like, oh yeah, that's an awesome choice, or no, you have ruined the scene, you've overwhelmed the scene with this music and it's not mixed well. The whole thing's not mixed very well, but that's second to a lot of other things. It's like it's like a first draft of something really really pretty decent, and they made a sequel, which, let's be honest, a sequel to an okay film is almost never better. But I'll probably end up watching it anyway, because this one was just good enough that it didn't feel like it was a waste of time. It's entertaining in its own right. Seeing Samuel L. Jackson is always entertaining, and the chemistry between he and Ryan Reynolds and basically all of the major cast, I think, works really well. Even if you don't like any of that, just watching the scenes with Gary Oldman, it's Gary Oldman. How can you not love him? He's amazing in everything. I don't know how he does it. Anyway, yeah, I don't give this a strong recommendation, but as I want to say, like there's worse ways you could spend 2 hours. And honestly, it doesn't feel like 2 hours. It keeps up a pretty good pace throughout the whole thing. Anyway, thank you guys for watching another episode of Solipsist Watched. I've been your host, the Social Solipsist, and I'll see you guys next time.